Lenin Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf mem. We're beginning Perek Hoya Boykin. We're going to investigate we're going to cross-examine the witnesses, and we learned we do chakiris and we do bedikas. And that's the Lashon, that's the text of the Gemara. I was going to tell you the Rambam makes three out of it, which is important. Chakiris are the questions to pinpoint the time, exactly when did it take place and where did it take place. And that is essential because the only way you can ever find if they're liars or not, and scrutinize their testimony is if we have a pinpoint of time. So two other witnesses could come along and say, hey, how can you say that when you were with us elsewhere at that particular time and that particular place? So it's essential. That's called chakiras, and we'll see there's 7 of them. And then you have bdikas. Bdikas are the questions he asks, so what happened, and give us some more details. Within bdikas itself, we have 2 levels. One level is essential questions like, how was he killed? Was he shot? Was he stabbed? Was he strangled? So that's negated to the edus. So in one level of cross-examination is within bedikas is essential to the testimony, and then there is peripheral stuff like what color clothing was the victim wearing when it happened, or what color clothing was the perpetrator wearing when it happened, and that's sort of more in the periphery. That's also called bedikas. So the Rambam says that the essential questions regarding what actually happened, he's a Mechal Shabbos. What did he actually do? One guy says he was driving a car. One guy says he was riding a motorcycle. So that is essential. We need to know what actually happened. So that is called, according to the Rambam, derishus. It's a necessary cross-examination. And then you have bedikas, which are general question to periphery, to ask them as many questions as they can, to confuse them, and so to help out the one that we're trying to allege there was a criminal. Okay, so now the Mishnah will tell us the following. You asked him 7 questions. You asked him which mita did it happen. We're just starting the Mishnah. New Perek. First of all, we ask him, we're trying to pinpoint, so we start from the beginning. Which Shemitah was it? Did this happen? The 7 Shemitahs within the Yovel. Which one? Which year? Which month? Which day in the month? It's Nisan, but what day of Nisan? And then Yom. What day of that? And Shah, what hour? And Makam, what place? Now, just what day of the week and what hour of the day, and then Makam, what place? Now, just very quickly, a little introductions. It seems to be a machlekes between the Noda B'Yehuda and the Shach and all the Achronim, the Chakiras, but without going a step further, what they're saying is a general question. Why do we believe witnesses? Why do we believe witnesses? Is it because it makes sense? 2 people come and tell us a story. Probably that's what happened. Or it's Exeres HaKosov. The Rambam clearly writes, and you say that it's Exeres HaKosov. Moshe and Aaron, who are the most credible people in the world, will not be believed. But 2 strangers, Amaratzim, we believe them. So it's Exeres HaKosov. The Torah says that the 2 Edom, Yachter, Sadabar, you conclude whatever it is. That's one way of understanding Edom. The other way, it's a logical thing. If 2 people come along and tell us a story, that's probably what happened. Now, we have a concept that Edom, in order to make sure they have credibility, they have to be able to be found out to be liars. If Edom can never be proven a liar, for example, they didn't tell us exactly when it happened, then there's no Edom. Now, why is there no Edom? So there's 2 ways of looking at it. If you learn that the whole din of Eidos is Exeres HaKosov, there's no logic to it, then the second din that Eidos have to be able to be discredited is also Exeres HaKosov. It's all part of the same Exeres HaKosov. But if you learn that Eidos is a logical thing, then the reason why we need to be able to discredit them if we can is to prove that their credibility. So it's, again, all part of the logic. And my nafkamina between the 2, a big nafkamina is, and we see contradictions and traces everywhere, and this is because one trace goes one way, one another way. That is, let's say the person, do we say that every question we ask him, that's considered Eidos, or there's no Eidos here until you finish the whole job? If it's Exeres HaKosov, there's no logic to the whole thing, then there's no Eidos here until you finish all 7 questions. And Kozman, you didn't finish the 7 questions, there's no Eidos. So therefore, for example, we ask him what day of the month it is. We ask him what day of the month it is, and he says the 4th. They both say the 4th day of the month. Why then ask him what day of the week it is? And if they change their mind, let's say one says Tuesday, one says Wednesday, so what? We have a rule, once you testified, you can't change your mind. So we'll discount what you say now. It's irrelevant. So why I'm asking? So if you learn, because the aegis is not over yet, it's no kibbutz higid. The higid will be when you finish the 7 questions. So therefore, it's important to keep on going through, and then we'll see whether they're lying or not. That's if you take the approach of the whole thing is exeris hakasuv, and therefore there's no aegis here. We keep up probing and probing. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is no. Every time he says a detail, it could already be found a liar. For example, if he says it happened in the month of Nisan, already if two Aiden come along and say, in the entire month of Nisan, you're with us somewhere else, we knocked you out. It's already starting to add some credibility. So every step of the way, you're giving, if it's a logical thing, then you're giving us Aedis. So what's the point of asking then, if he said Wednesday, if we both say it's the Daled Nisan, why bother asking what day it is? Who cares what he says? Because Kim Magid. So therefore, another Taisus says, the reason is, what happens if one guy said it was the 3rd day of Nisan and one guy says the 4th day of Nisan? Now, we don't know. Is they lying? Or is it because one guy didn't realize when Rosh Chodesh is? So by asking them what day of the week it was, and they both say Wednesday, it proves to us that they were not contradicting each other. They just, one person didn't know the calendar, and one person didn't know the calendar. So then it's not a question of Kimish Higid. Even though normally, so no, the only time that we would ask you what day of the week it is if there's a discrepancy in what day of the month. But if you both said the same day of the month, you both said it happened down Nisan, according to this view, we're not going to ask you what day of the week it is. We don't care what you say because you're changing your mind. And okay, because there are 2 approaches in Taisus, in Psachim, and one Taisus over here seems to be learning that every step of the way is Aedis. Taisus Psachim says that it's not. That doesn't happen until the very end. So just explain the whole idea. And again, the Rambam's view, the 3 levels, even though the Mishnah and the Gemara talk about 2 levels, 3 levels. Chakiris, the Rambam makes up Drishas and Bedikas. Chakiris are the 7 questions. Drishas are the essential questions like what happened, and the Bedikas are the peripheral questions. And it's negated, as the Mishnah will continue. Okay, we're up to the Mishnah here now. We finished the Chakiris, what they are, the delineating and specifying the time and the place. Then the Mishnah continues. Then we ask him, now we finish with the Chakiris, now goes to the next stage. Makida Mata Moisa, do you know this person? Machlek is a shaynim, are we talking about the victim who's a Jewish or who's not Jewish, or the perpetrator? He talked about, did you give him Hasra? So again, these are not Chakiris, these are Drishas already. These are questions about what happened. Did you give him a warning? Oh, sorry, I missed a line. Sorry. Rabbi Yossi says we only have 3 questions for him. Be'ezah yom, which day, Be'ezah shar, which hour, and Be'ezah makkah, which place. The Gemara will explain Rabbi Yossi's view. Then we continue. Now goes according to the Rambam, the Drishas, according to the way we generally put it all under the banner of Bedikas. Makira Mata, say, you know the victim or the perpetrator, he talked about, you give him Hasra. Let's say you're coming along and telling us he worshipped our idol. It's me, other, which idol? The Kama, what did he do? Did he bow down to it? What was the activity? The 4 main activities. What did he do? And the more bedikas you do, the better it is, because then you can work out whether they're lying or not. Maise, and then the Gemara brings a Mishnah. Maise, and the Gemara will discuss all this. Ubadak ben Zakai. We'll see more later. This Yechem ben Zakai. But Ukse Te'enim. He asked them questions regarding the figs. And the Gemara will conclude that Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai actually argues on the Tanakhama. He holds that even peripheral things like, okay, you said it happened under the victim was murdered under this fig tree. So tell me, the figs, the stems, were they thick? Were they thin? Long, short? Peripheral question. And according to Yechon Zakkai, if they contradict each other in these peripheral things, they're knocked out. Now, not like the Tanakhama. What does Tanakhama say? What is the difference between Chakir and Bedikas? Chakir is Echad, I mean, they do some Taylor. By Chakir, if a guy says, I don't know what happened exactly, doesn't matter which one of the 7 questions, the whole thing is bottled, because either Xeris Akasav or because logically, how we're going to discredit him if they leave out a detail like what day of the week it was, or where it happened. Bedikas, but when it comes to Bedikas, Echad Omer Eina Yedeyef, one of them says, I don't know. I feel the Shnaim, I mean, you're asking me what color clothes were. I didn't notice. Because that doesn't have an impact on the actual, what happened. Now, whether this any day applies also to this, to what the Rambam calls drishas is a different story. Echad chakiris, echad bedikas. Now, whether it's Chakidis, big machlek is a shayim. If a guy says it happened yesterday, he still then give all these 7 questions. Big machlek is a shayim. The Ram brings up in the David, whatever. The big machlek is a shayim. He said yesterday. You have to ask him what Shemitah. He said yesterday. More or less, it falls along the lines that if it's Exeris HaKasav, you need to ask the 7 questions. If it's a logical thing, then and based to prove your credibility, well, we know exactly what you mean. You said yesterday, so or today, yeah, today. As the Gemara will say, today is very seldom happens that mamish the day it happens you're there right in court, but yesterday. But anyway, we'll see. Whether we talk about chakidus, but when it comes to Bedikah, they contradict each other, then the age is a bottle unless we can understand their words. Remember we said about wine and oil, he meant the money of wine, or one says in the upper balcony, the lower balcony. It depends if you're looking at it. They both seem to be, then it's an honest mistake rather than a contradiction. Okay. If one guy said, remember we had this Gemara in Pesach, if one guy says it happened on the 2nd day of the month, one guy says it happened the 3rd day of the month, Eidus HaKayemis. Why Eidus HaKayemis? But this guy knows when there's Chodesh, the guy knows that that's a Chodesh. And the Gemara, we'll learn about the Gemara says that most people don't know when there's Chodesh is. And you need to say most people, Tesis explains, because then if we ask you afterwards what day of the week, if most people do know what day there's Chodesh is, and one guy says Dal, one guy says Hey, and then we ask him what day of the week is it, someone will say Wednesday, isn't that Kibbutz Higit Shuv and Chayzer Magid? In other words, that Tesis approach learns clearly that every step of the Edus is Edus. In other words, it's a lot that Tesis approaches. It's a logical thing, and therefore, every time you make it, you're narrowing it down. You make it possible for us to discredit you. So therefore, it's Adis, and therefore Tesis explains that that's how the Gemara knows the majority of the people don't know what day of the month it is. So therefore, it's not Kibbutz Magid because when you said Wednesday, it proved to us that when you said yesterday, hey, or this guy said Daled, one of them just making an error. It says right in the Paskin, but today this doesn't apply because we know to this, and only those days they didn't know when it's Chodesh is. They have a calendar. Everyone should know when it's Chodesh is. Even though every time you go to shul, there's always an argument. Which days are the Chodesh month? You there? Oh, there you have it. In our shul, we got it right. But one guy said the 3rd day of the month and the 5th month, Eidus and Betela. The Eidus is bottle. Now the Chayde, why bottle? If the next day, if they say the next, it happened on Wednesday, doesn't that prove that they from the few that made a mistake? Says Tesis doesn't that prove This is the case of changing your mind because very few people make a mistake. Tudas Chodesh, you have no idea what's happening. Very few people are that, that's so out of it. And therefore, so that proves that point. Anyway, one guy said it happened 2 hours, 3 hours. They do the kayemis, but people make a mistake. Third and fifth, in other words, you make a mistake for what? Now, if you remember the Gemara in Pesachim, very Bekitza, we had a Abaye had over there. Abaye says that according to Rav Meir, people make either zero mistake or people make a mistake of a few minutes. And when that happened, one guy says 2, one guy says 3. 2 means the end of the second hour, and 3 means the beginning of the third. According to what the first shot is, it happened at the same moment, which you can either count it as the end of the second or count the beginning of the third, and therefore people don't make mistakes at all. And or it happened, either beginning of the third, end of the second, and one guy's making a mistake a little bit. That's Abaye. And Rabbi comes along and said, "What are you talking about? Why are we trying to make it to kill the person? But you ask them that and what they mean." So the Rabbi says, no, we assume the worst. When he said second hour, he meant the beginning of the second hour. When he said the third hour, he meant the end of the third hour. And people, according to Meir, make a mistake of 2 hours less a little bit. According to Abaye, we assume that both made a little bit of a mistake. According to Rabbi, only one person made a mistake. But the maximum mistake you can make is up to 2 hours, a little bit less. And so we're following the Rabbi's way. And Rabbi Yehuda says, kayemis. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, that a person can make a mistake, even shalosh and chamish, up to 3 hours, a little bit less. Up to 3 hours. There was a mice at the Rogatchover once. That a Rav came to town to the Rogatchover in Vinsk, and he said he wanted to give a pupil in the Rogatchover shul. And he had a lot of guts, I guess. And Rogatchover didn't want him to go, but anyway, he put a lot of pressure. Balbatim, so he spoke. 4 hours he tried to impress the Rogatchover. So when he finished, he came to Rogatchover, "Nu, what do you think of my drasha?" He says, "You're not like Rabbi Meir, nor like Rabbi Yehuda." what I just said, I did talk about it. What Rabbi Yehuda? She says, Rameir says a person makes a mistake up to 2 hours. If he's up to 3 hours, you 4 hours of this. No one makes such mistakes. Anyway. One guy said it happened the 5th hour of the day, and one guy said it happened the 7th hour of the day. Do some betela. Why? Because that mistake we cannot tolerate. Why not? The sun is different size of the. Because in those days they had no clocks. They used to look at the sun, or they had a sun clock, or at least they should look at the sun, and you can. Everybody knows the difference if the sun's on this side or on that side. That's ages number one. Then they bring in the second guy who biking to check him out. Even into the they're all saying the same thing. Then the opening should be, remember, we're talking about Din Nefash is now trying to find ways of vindicating, absolving this person. One of the agents said, one of the agents who incriminated him says, I have a schus to somehow or another exonerate him. We don't listen. If you remember, the reason why is maybe he's feeling guilty and he's trying to, he's trying to assuage his guilt. If one of the students says, yes, I have ways of finding him guilty, because says, you shouldn't, echad shouldn't be l'ra. One of me says, I can find a schus in him. Bring him up to the bezin, and we count him as a vote. Big machlek is showing him if it's forever, now becomes a member of the bezin, or till the end of this case. He sits there. He doesn't go down. If there's a substance there, even if the victim says, not the victim, the alleged criminal says, the perpetrator, I can find a schus for myself. Again, you have to have substance. If they found a schus, patru, they would send them away. And if not, if they did not find a schus, they would send this guy away, and the following day, remember they cannot find a schus and they have to find him guilty. We don't paskin the same day. You wait one more day before you paskin. And that night they pair up. They wouldn't eat and drink. How can they drink? They're discussing the life of this person. The Noisim and Noisim call Lila. They have this debate all night long. Well, the Mochas, the following day, Mashkimin or Boyin the Bezin, they come early to the Bezin because we don't want to delay justice. Hamazaka, Imani Mazaka, Umazaka, remaining. The one who found him guilty said, if you started out, you can change your mind. You cannot start the day thinking chayv. But if you remember, Rab already told us that's all talking about in the discussions. But when it comes to paskening, at the end of the day, if you think that the person is guilty, he's guilty. You can't remember what your approach was yesterday. Shnei Sefer had the yanin, the two Sefer in the maskinas will remind you. No. If they found the schus, they send him away. And if not, they start counting. 12 find him innocent, 11 find him guilty, then Zaki. That's the majority. And if 12 find him innocent, 11 find it. Sorry, 12. If 12 find him guilty, and 11 find him innocent, I feel like or 11. I don't know. I feel like 22 say that he is innocent, or guilty. Doesn't know. So doesn't matter if he knows, he doesn't know. The problem is when a guy says doesn't know, is as if he's not there. And the Torah says we had before, we need 23 judges. Is Yesif Hadayoni, keep on adding. The Kama Mesifim, we always add in multiples of Shnaim too. Add Shim Vechatzu, you reach a Bezna 71. Shloishim V'Shisha Mezakin, you reach 31. 71. But the problem with 71 is you can have a rave of only one. What happens if you have 30? Shloishim V'Shisha Mezakin, Shloishim Chayim 36 versus 35. Is Zaka, he's innocent. What do you do? You only have a majority of one. What do you do? You can't add anymore. You can't have more than Sanhedrin Daf. So what do you do is Donin Elu Keneged Elu. They sit and they argue with each other. Ad Shigida Echem and Amachayim and Dir Mazaki. Until one of them sees the word of Mazaki. We asked a question on this from Rab. Why did you say it all the way around? And the Rab answered because the mission is always trying to find. We always take the positive approach. We're trying to find the guy innocent. In more Haris, we're going to learn the case of 100 Sanhedrin. Made a mistake, whatever it is, and we're going to have to work out there. How do you ever have 100 Sanhedrin when it says clearly you can't have more than 71 ever? Even, multiples of 2, we don't say continue adding more. That's it. This is the peak. How do you have 100? Anyway, says Gemara. How do you know the whole idea of Chakiris? We have 3 psukim. One pasuk is with the Rashta, the Chakarta, the Shahalta, Eite. By Iradach, it says you should be Deirish. you should be chayker. And this is where the Rambam gets a drishus. The Rambam makes up the third one, drishus, because the Torah says you the Rash. The Rash is a bunch of questions. The Chakart is a bunch of questions. V'sha'alta sounds a bit more passive, ask. So the Torah adds the word hativ, not stam, taru. So you have three forms of questions. That's three. And then we have a pasuk when remember, bear in mind the ir and dachas they get sayif. The punishment is cherev. The next pasuk is which a punishment is skill. It says, "Who got loch will tell you, but shamata you will listen, but the rashta hated." Here it says, "But the rashta," which is a strong word, and then it says hated, another strong word. So that's two more forms of interrogation. Then it says, and then it says, what do you call it? Eidim Zaymin, V'doshu Hashaitim Hativ. Again, V'doshu and Hativ, another two. You have two and three is seven. Says the Gemara, how do you know to combine all of them? Maybe the din is Eredachas, you do three kinds of questions. By Eidim Zaymin, you do two. And by Vedazari, you do two. How do you know? Maybe each Avera, you do whatever it is. Says the Gemara, no, because Im Kain Lichtabin Achmad B'chad. Sorry, part of the question. If the Torah wants you should ask 7 questions on every kind of capital punishment, then the Torah should have put them all together in whichever it is, and then we'll learn from there. Says the Gemara, since all of them written more or less the same expression, you have to be Darash, you have to be Daidish. So therefore, Mahadadi, you have to be learning from each other. The Yalfi Hadadi commanded since they're all similar, it's as if they're all written in one place, all 7. What are you talking about? They're not. Each Aveda is different. Now remember, what we're doing by asking questions is actually a kula. Because the more questions we ask the witnesses, we'll discredit them. They will stumble, they'll make a mistake, and if they say I don't know, or if they contradict each other, we throw it out. So what we're doing is we're helping the defendant. We're helping the defendant here. That's what it is. So the Gemara's assumption is going to be when it comes to a lighter Aveda, makes sense. If the Torah tells you when it comes to cherev that we are going to ask as many questions as possible to help the defendant, we cannot automatically assume that when it comes to Ilan Adachas, which is not Yadachas, when it comes to Avodah Zarah, which you get skila, that we're also going to ask so many questions. Maybe Avodah Zarah is such a terrible Aveda, we'll ask less questions so that we can find the person guilty. Okay, that's the approach to the Gemara. The more question it is, we're helping the perpetrator, because the Adam, chances are that they're going to make a mistake. Says the Gemara, that's part of the question. They're all different from each other, and you can't learn any of them. And each one has a chumrah. And once it has a chumrah, maybe we don't ask so many questions. What's the chumrah being in dachas? That all their possessions get burnt. No other capital punishment. We say that for we have common rabbinay. Even if you did a skill to get with mammon, we don't punish you the mammon. So only by Yenadacha. So there's a chumrah there that maybe there taka we ask less questions. Such a terrible aveda, you lose all your money. Maybe 2 or 3 questions and that's it. They're all saved with their money, but they're taking here not. So maybe all you ask is the 3 questions the Torah says. Avodah Zarah, if the Torah would not have said Avodah Zarah, we had to take that to write because he couldn't learn from anywhere else. She came by Saif. Avodah Zarah, you get skill, and this is only Saif. Adam Zaynik Lahanav Tati Ledamia, and his Zaym as well not. She can't see in Hasra. Adam Zaymin, everywhere else, before you punish somebody, you have to warn them, and we'll see later. He has to say, I don't care. Yativ Chomis, I don't care. I'm ready to die for it. He has to say those words. Adam Zaymin, there's no Hasra. Why Taka is no Hasra Adam Zaymin? Because they tried to kill a person who's innocent. I mean, that person never had Hasra. And since we have to do Kasha Zama to do the Adam exactly what they intend to do, Adam Zaymin, there's no warning. We don't give them a warning. Actually, the Gemara Gimel discusses why don't you give a warning. Then Gemara asks the Amos, when can you give a warning? And in practicality, also, it's impossible. Anyway, the Gemara continues. The hated Yafin and Mahadadi. Gemara answers, right. It's Xer Shava. Each pasuk says hated. The Rasha to hated, Shal to hated. Everyone says a hated, and for the hated, Xer Shava. Now remember, we have a rule by Xer Shava that if you could ask a question, then Xer Shava falls apart unless it's mufna, it's extra, and it has to be mufna mishneitz dadim. Otherwise, we can ask the very question we just said right now. You can't have Xer Shava. Each one is different. Each one has a chumrah. We need to know. Xer Shava mufna. You must conclude that these words hative are extra because it's not extra. We can ask the question we just asked. How can you learn one from another? Each one is different. Says the Gemara, you're right. They're all extra. Why are they all extra? They could have just said another word, instead, it could have said, for example, by Ein Zayman. By Ein Zayman, it says two words there. It says, V'drashta hated. Just say, V'dosha v'chakru. Why introduce the word hated? The fact that you use the word hated, a new word, instead of the word normally, which is the rashta, v'chakarta, words which mean cross-examine, is extra. Even though the word is not extra, we need a word to tell you there's another drusha, but it could have used the more common word rather than this word here. The raya comes to be extra. All we know is okay, by Zayim it's extra. Okay, I understand when it comes to because Avodah Zorah. And when it comes to Zayim, with only two each, he could have used another word, instead of hated. Okay, so both of them extra. But we need Ir Adachas extra as well. But Ir Adachas he couldn't. Ir Adachas he already used every possible word. This is the Rashi Chakarta V'Shalta. So I mean, Shalta doesn't have the same cross examination. Shalta is like ask politely, So we had no, but anyway, we had to use the word hated. So it's not extra anymore. Where's the extra third one? Freddy Gemara, Elina Dachas, Mahabal, what else could have written? They're all there. Every possible word to use for cross examination is there. It's also extra. But how Mithra could have said Dore Tiddish. Repeat the same word twice. Dore Tiddish. I Chakataka, Bashani Krabba, the Buddha hated and changed it. Would hate the Shmam and Lafnuya. So all three haters are extra. Says the Gemara, okay, but all we know now is Skila and Sayif, but we don't really know. We don't know, let's say, Chenek. We don't know Chenek. Even though Aiden Zaymin is whatever the punishment is, Aiden Zaymin covers them all. But since Ein Zayim is not mafurish on them all, so maybe it's not including chenek. The Gemara of us and chenek. Remember, we try. Remember, the more questions he asks, the easier it is for the plaintiff. Since chenek is the lightest punishment we have, even though we have machlek later, where the chenek or sayif is lighter, but definitely chenek is lighter than skila. So madach such a strict aveda, we still ask so many questions to try to stumble the edim. So then surely chenik, which is lighter than that, surely. Miniskolim, umanaragin. But also nisrafin. And what about nisrafin? The sreifa, where you have sreifa again, not Rab Shimon, but the Chacham hold that skill is the harshest aveda, and sreifa is one step lower. But also miniskolim. You're right. That makes sense. Going to niskila chamura, skill stricter. Rab Shimon, Rab Shimon holds sreifa the strictest. Maybe talking by sreifa, you don't ask the chakiras, you don't ask the same questions because it's so strict. Then you don't ask any questions. Michael, man, what do you say then? There's another pasuk. V'hinei emes nochen. It says you should, and in that very pasuk where it says, "But the Rashi Chakata Shalta hated," it says v'hinei turns out to be that emes nochen hadavar. Emes nochen hadavar means that there have to be there has to be equanimity between the edim, and everything has to be sorted out. The hine emes nochen, it says twice in the emes nochen. So therefore, that's how we know that it has to be even by everything else as well. Freddy Gemara, so you have two times emes nochen. That's another 4. So you should have now 11 questions, right? So you want to answer like this. Sheva l'sheva chakidus. This is what we do. 7, you keep for the 7 chakidus we asked before, the year, the shmit, and all that. Dal plus l'gzeir shava. You have 3 extra for gzeir shava. Partial luchada. You have 1 left. Emes nochen twice is 4. It's 3 of them you need for the gzeir shava to compare all 3. But still, we're missing out sreifa. Now, according to Rab Shimon, you don't learn sreifa from Kal V'Chaim because sreifa is stricter. Is that last one? According to Rab Shimon, last 2 in Nisrafim to teach you. Those who get burnt, a bas kohen who commits adultery, she gets sreifa. That also you ask these 7 questions. What about Rabbanon? What do they do with this extra? Milsa, the famous thing. Even though we can learn logically, we still have a pasuk for it. We mocked it. How do you know it's Tam in the Velteram is written? Maybe there's an 8th question you ask. There's such a thing as an 8th question. What else can you ask? We're so specific already. Why not? You tell me the hour, right? But what was it? 10:30, 10:15? So don't ask me how they were able to be so accurate in those days with the sun, but that's the question. And you should know it's not so outrageous because the Tanya Nami Hochun the Brisa you boy can There's a Brisa actually holds one opinion that they asked also what time. So this makes sense. Remember, I just told you Abaya holds that a maid holds that person makes no mistake at all, or you make a mashu. So therefore you got to tell me it's 9:05, 9:10. You know, you could be very exact. A person make a mistake at all. Abaya according to Rabbi Yehuda. And the look at even a Baya who minimizes it says that, you know, when one guy says it happened 3 and one guy says it happened 5, so we say it really happened in the middle of 4. Each one is making a mistake of a half an hour. And according to Rav, a person makes a mistake up to 2 hours or up to 3 hours. Remember, what's the point of asking him if it's 9:30? The guy doesn't know. You know what the 8th question would be? Which Shemitah was in Yevel? We already asked that question. That's the first question we asked. Which Shemitah? Ask him, which Jubilee? This one or the one before? There's no statute of limitations in either Shua. The Gemara says, once you tell me which Shemitah lay boy Yevel, no point asking which Yevel because people don't wait 50 years before they come along. You know, because once you establish which Shemitah it is, it's 50 years from the last time. People don't wait that long to come to court. Even though you have all these things now, you hear about these cold cases that they just caught now somebody who did, 1980, which is 40 something years ago. They just caught the guy with DNA, and all those things. So, but Adam, I guess, would compel him or impel him to come sooner. Then further, Daniel, you said 3. You said, let me ask a question. If a guy comes along and says, yesterday they killed. We're going to ask him, so which mitzvah was it? You ask him all these questions? No. So therefore, there's no point in asking him as well. If we just ask him the day, and we already fine-tuned it to exactly when it is. We don't have to ask all those detailed questions. So they said to him, if your logic is that, we know already what's going on, we don't have to ask him all these other questions. If a guy comes along and says, today it happened, we can ask him no questions at all. You said we have to ask 3 questions. According to you, let me ask a question. Why bother even asking 3 questions? If he says today, like you said, why ask him Be'ezer Yom? He told you it happened this morning or today. And why? The only question is Be'ezer Makom, but that's it. Why 3? And you're minded that you need 3 questions. Why? Even though you don't have to, we ask the question so that maybe it's a stumble, they should contradict each other. And the reason is Rav Shimon Elazar, Rabbi Yossi. Rav Shimon Elazar. What Rabbi Shimon Elazar say? That we move the Eidim around to confuse them. So we want them to contradict each other. And I told you last time, Rashi and the Rambam. Rashi holds you move them from place to place, which is a little bit hard to understand here. This is not the same thing as asking more questions. According to Rashi, we just move them around and that sort of shakes them up. They don't feel comfortable. But the Rambam uses this Gemara as a raya. The Rambam says, no, it means changing the inyan. You keep on bombarding them with questions so that they get confused. So this is actually exactly what we're doing here, even though it's totally unnecessary. Because when you say today, we know what's going on, and you be waiting for 3, so too. If you say it happened yesterday, we'll still ask you all the questions. The Rishonim, the Machlekes is, when do we ask these 7 questions? What happened? Is it before the Eidim open their mouths? Right away, we know why you're here, so we ask these questions. But if the Eid Taka said it happened yesterday, even the Rabban will be made to ask the question. They're only saying lechatchil. We don't give him the chance. We can ask them questions. Or even if the guy says yesterday it happened, the Rabban will say today is a custom. We have to ask. And the nafkamina would be if it's exeris hakasiv or if it's logic for credibility. If it's exeris hakasiv, you got to go through the 7 questions. If it's logic, we know exactly what he's talking about. If he volunteered information before we had a chance to ask, then we could be mazimim. There's no point in asking these other; they're redundant. But and others say even so, because of Shimon Elazar, we should try to confuse them. Rabbi Yossi emesh hargu. Rabbi Yossi, that's the question. Emesh hargu shliach. It's common for Aiden to say, yesterday this happened. I saw this. But Rabbi Yossi, achshav hargu l'shkiv Rabbi Yossi. It's very seldom you have a guy happen mamish today and run straight to court. It doesn't happen that often. Do you recognize this person? What am I going to Nochi harag Yisrael harag. The machlekes gesayis are the hoyreg or harag. That was the victim. Was he either a guy or the perpetrator? I said, he gave him hasra, and then we ask another question. Kibul all of us. In order for him to be guilty, he has to say, yes, I know, and I don't care. Another thing he has to do, you have to tell him what misa it is. The punishment will be skila, and he has to say, "I don't care." Hey, me b'toich k'dei dibur. Did you kill him b'toich k'dei dibur? It has to be within. Otherwise, he say, "I forgot." As he says in Ksubis. Ha'ovid avodah zarah. If a guy is serving avodah zarah, mi avad. We ask him which avodah zarah was it. L'poir avad, l'makulus avad. Which avodah zarah is it? Uvamei avad. What did he do? B'zibuach, b'kitter, b'nisr shtach. These are the four main avodas. He shechted for it. Did he do incense or pour libations or bow down? And there are other avodas which are specific to that avodah zarah, like stones and all that. How do you know Hasra is not Torah? I know not Torah. What's the question? We learned the reason why you need Hasra, we had before already, is Lahavchin ben Shegin Lemezah. How do we know the guy did it Lemezah, so he deserves to be killed? He didn't realize it's Aveda, whatever it is. How do we know? What's the question on Hasra? So Taisa says it's going according to the Gemara, the opinion that says that a chaver, because we learned that says a chaver, you don't have to give Hasra. Because a chaver knows the halachas. There's another opinion that says that even a chaver needs to know the halachas. And so the one who says that a chaver also needs a warning, it must be exeis akasha, because a chaver knows whether it's asa or it's not asa. So it must be exeis akasha. What is it? And what do you call? Or the question is, how do you know that it has to be trech kedibur? Says the Gemara. It says the Isha, he saw the erva. Who cares if he saw it? Didn't see? It's irrelevant. The point is if he committed an aveda with the erva. Until they told him what's wrong with what he's doing. And he made Lakadas, it can't be for Kadas. Hashem knows exactly what you're doing over here, whether you knew what you're doing, you didn't know what you're doing, or whether you're shaking amazing. It's real Malkus. It's talking about Malkus. Now what? Because your sister, the punishment is Malkus. From here, it says Vechi, and if Yazir and he did on purpose of the Eyu. Women and what? What's the continuation? After the Asra, and he continued doing what he was doing. The Hargai Barama to kill him with ambush. He's amazing. They warned him, and he's still doing it. The very Bashmaltan, it says Hamoitzim Oisim Mekoshish. They found the guy, and he was still being Mekoshish. Doesn't say he already was Mekoshish. He's still doing it. He's still doing it, even though they warned him. He's still continuing. He's by Badain Mekoshish. They warned him still doing it. And the Rebbe Tana said 4 different Mekoshish. He says it says in the pasuk, I'll what do you call it? It says in the city, if a person has with a married woman or arusa, we say that both are guilty. Now what do you al-dvar is al-dibur. We're punishing them because of the words. Which words? The words is that they gave us and they didn't care. We know all of them. All of them we need to teach us. Okay, chayav in malkaz, you have to give us because it's a light thing. So okay, we'll make it easier. But if a guy does such a strict aveda that chayav mitzvah, we're not going to give him get him off if we don't give him the right, hasra and all these other steps that we said before. Okay, a lighter punishment like sayif. Okay, if you don't do hasra, it'll be easier. The kill aval skila, the chamurim comes from aveda of skila like mekoshes eitzim on Shabbos mechal Shabbos, then there we're not going to let him off because he didn't give proper asra. Hey, malay tzricha. But tatim is going lamali. But you have 2 psukim. You also have the case of the arusa, the arusa over there. L'chayda. What else is l'chayda? What do you call it? It's against skila. What do you need 2 psukim to tell you that by skila you have to give asra? No, we need that the extra pasuk for Rav Shimon. La'asuye nisraf. Remember, Rav Shimon holds nisraf is even stricter. The extra pasuk tell you even nisraf. Nul rabbanon. Milsa, that's we already have it twice now. Things which we can do in logic, the Taylor wrote it down. So Gemara said, so write only by skila, and then we'll know the strict of it. Learn the rest. You're right. Milsa, the asik 3 extra times to teach you all that. We'll pause here a minute. Rav Shimon will use one of them for, you only have 2 extra ones. Rav Shimon will use one for skila, one for sefer. And the other 2 is Milsa Kosaka. Okay, we'll stop here for about 1 minute.